Okay, so on February 17th, 2026, a solar eclipse is going to cast a shadow across the sky. But what if the real shadow doesn't fall on the Earth, but on the very architecture of our digital world? We're about to dive into a theory that connects this single celestial event to a potential global reset.
Look, this isn't just about the moon passing in front of the sun. The thinking goes that this specific date could kick off a kind of reset protocol for our entire global digital network. So let's break down exactly why.
What really matters here is the location, 28 degrees of Aquarius. Now, in astrology, Aquarius has always been linked to innovation, electricity, and networks, the literal fabric of our modern world. So when a really disruptive event like an eclipse happens right there, well, it's seen as a critical moment for the operating system of the 21st century.
To really get what's at stake, we need to look at this through a specific lens: mundane astrology. Basically, this is the branch that looks at the birth charts of things like nations, stock markets, and major world events. It treats these huge systems like they're living entities with their own cycles. So for this whole analysis, that's the framework we're going to be using.
So here's the plan. First, the ignition. We'll set up the core link between this eclipse and our tech. Then we'll get into the potential for a major market shock, and even a cyber war. After that, we're going to turn inward to the global psyche before we land on the final outcome, the reboot, and what happens after everything flickers.
All right, Section 1, the ignition. Before we can get into the wild stuff like markets or politics, we've got to lay the groundwork and establish the fundamental connection this theory makes between the cosmos and our code. This quote from historian Richard Tarnas really gets to the heart of it. What he's saying is that the way we already talk about the internet, with words like cyberspace or the global mind, it totally mirrors these ancient astrological ideas about a collective consciousness. The planet Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius, is absolutely central to this idea of a huge interconnected network. The theory then is that the internet is just the modern-day version of this very old architecture.
So if a cosmic event can actually affect the digital world, where's the first place you'd expect to see the impact? Yep, in our most digital markets. And that brings us straight to the world of finance.
Believe it or not, some financial analysts actually give entities like the stock market a birth chart. What you're looking at is the horoscope for the NASDAQ, calculated for its very first trade back in 1971. And what's so fascinating is that the NASDAQ is the tech-heavy index, right? It's basically the financial expression of that same Aquarian network-driven idea we were just talking about.
And this is where the timing gets really interesting. This quote from financial astrologer M.G. Buchholz points to mid-2026, which is right when our eclipse happens, as a super high-risk period that could mark the end of a major economic cycle. So from this perspective, the eclipse isn't happening in a vacuum. It could be this specific trigger for a crisis that the cycles were already pointing to.
So, which markets are most vulnerable? We're not talking about the old economy of oil and steel. No, Aquarius rules the unorthodox, the electric, the intangible. We are looking at a serious high volatility window for things like AI, quantum computing, and especially crypto and DeFi. These are the systems built on pure data and code, the ones most sensitive to this kind of cosmic power surge.
So what's the prediction? Not a slow downturn, but a sudden system shock. Think flash crash, an algorithmic hiccup, or maybe a sudden unexplained liquidity freeze in digital assets. It's the kind of chaotic system update you definitely never asked for, and it could be triggered by some kind of surprise regulatory news that tries to cage these decentralized markets.
Okay, let's zoom out from the markets and look at global conflict. Because if Aquarius rules the networks, then the very nature of war itself has to be changing too.
Think about it. 20th century conflict was all about tanks, trenches, and physical borders. But war in the 21st century, it's about data, networks, and infrastructure. The new battlefields are the undersea fiber optic cables and the satellites orbiting the planet. This eclipse could signal a major escalation in this kind of hybrid warfare, where the target isn't a city, it's a power grid or a data center.
And the conflict isn't just between nations. This isn't some New Age idea, by the way. This classical text, Raphael's Mundane Astrology, makes a direct link between the planet Uranus, Aquarius's ruler, and civil unrest. It talks about insurrections and rioting among the people.
And here's the kicker. Aquarius is the sign of the people, the collective. An eclipse right here could trigger sudden populist movements that seem to erupt out of nowhere.
We're not talking about a revolution with a clear leader. We're talking about a decentralized swarm coordinated entirely through social media that could ignite in places we all thought were completely stable.
Okay, so this brings us from the external world of markets and conflict to the internal one. I mean, if the global network gets a major shock, what does that do to our own internal wiring? Let's talk about the impact on the global psyche.
The core idea here is actually pretty simple, but it's powerful. If Aquarius governs the world's networks, it also governs our own nervous system. An eclipse happening here can create a kind of collective short circuit, leaving all of us feeling, well, wired, but tired.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. Richard Tarnas actually documents the tangible symptoms of this. Things like psychic numbing, a real confusion between what's real and what's virtual, this kind of free-floating anxiety, apathy, and just a deep spiritual weariness. You know that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by too much information and not enough meaning? That's it.
But what's really interesting here is that the primary danger isn't an emotional panic. It's not about fear. It's a cerebral event, a collective dissociation. It's a total loss of empathy in favor of pure, cold logic. It's the rise of the machine mind over the human heart.
So you have our systems, financial, political, and even psychological, all poised to flicker. And that brings us to our final and maybe most important section, the reboot.
And this is the ultimate question. A system reboot, it clears out all the old data, sure, but it also creates this moment of total vulnerability. So when the power comes back on, who controls the switch?
The takeaway here really isn't a prediction, but a strategy. In a world that's about to go through a massive digital overload, maybe the most radical act you can take is to just log off. Disconnect from all the noise so you can reconnect with what's real, what's tangible, and what's human.
So that's the final message.